Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thinktown Podcast. This one is going to be more along the lines of a Thinktown Light because we're going to do a pretty quick segment on one particular topic, a topic that Mackenzie had forwarded to all of us either yesterday or today. And it's something that I had read and I'm going to grab it on my phone. First of all, welcome Mackenzie and Chad. Kendall's not with us tonight. Kendall will be joining us again next week. He had some other stuff that he was tending to tonight. So wish he could be here, but he's not. So Chad and Mackenzie, thank you guys for joining.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah.
All right, let's pull this up. I'm going to pull the one that I read up because is this the same article that we have, Chad?
That's the link you sent me.
Okay. So let me see if that's the same one that I have. I think I might have opened a different one.
This one is find another one, but yeah.
Let's see. Is who wrote this one? I have the New York Times one on my phone. Which one is that?
No, I think I had something by like the
Free
Washington
Beacon.
Post or something.
Oh yeah, the Free Beacon. Free Beacon was a little bit more of a conservative slant. I was kind of curious what some of the more liberal rags were saying, so I'll pull up the New York Times. Essentially, what this is, it is a almost like a permission slip for folks to groom and eventually have sex with people under the age of 18. Now, I know what some people are going to say, that that's not what the intent of this is. It was intended for people right under the age of 18. And of course, you might know in some of your other countries, more notably in the Mideast, grown men 30, 40 years old can marry a 6-year-old. So they're trying to make this acceptable worldwide because of the UN. And we'll get more into what the UN means and why it matters if the UN says something and why it doesn't matter if the UN says something. But the overall agenda here is the fact that they're trying to decriminalize of-age adults having sex with below 18, saying that, and the reason why they point this out in this particular article is that they're saying that people below the age of 18 can consent. Well, and hear me out on this, guys, before y'all chime in, including you, Chad and Mackenzie. I agree a young person can consent. Just like a young person can consent to drinking a can of beer, a 6-year-old could say, yeah, I'd love to have a drink of beer. You know what I mean? A 6-year-old could say, I'd like to snort a line of cocaine. Does it make it okay? That, in other words, the word of consent is just saying that, yes, you would be okay to do it. Does that mean that it's an okay thing to do? And the very fact that somebody wants a 6-year-old or whatever age to consent is a bit troubling to me, because I see this, again, as I stated a moment ago, that I see this more as somebody is going to want to push back and go, oh, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about if an 18-year-old wants to have sex with a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. That's what some of the people are going to say. But whenever laws are laws and words mean things. So if you pass a law that says anybody under the age of 18 can consent, that means a 6-year-old by law. If you don't want it to include 6-year-olds, you pass the law stating otherwise. So Chad and Mackenzie, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I got the article you sent just a little while ago, so I was reading it, and I have all daughters. I mean, I'm kind of the same, but I mean, you have friends. Hey, we've all known somebody. Kids get pregnant in high school. They have the babies. They're fine, but I mean, what do you do with that? It's not that they did give consent, I guess, but I don't know. I'm confused. I'm torn on this one because to me, it opens up a can of worms of, in those situations where the girls don't give consent, can that aggressor say they did?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a tough one here.
Well, to me, I think it's really disturbing because of the fact that we have you could have 40, 50, 60-year-old men grooming a 17, 16, 15-year-old. And to me, that doesn't sit right because our brains aren't even fully developed until I don't even know. I think our late 20s. And so I feel like it's a way for predators to kind of reel their way in. And in some way, I don't know. It doesn't sit. It's disgusting to me.
I mean, take the internet and the predators on the internet. Hey, I'm portraying myself as a 17-year-old boy, and when I meet you, I'm a 35-year-old man. And hey,
it's like Candyland for predators.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I mean,
It's Candyland for predators.
it is. And the only reason why you don't hear more of the grown men grooming really, really, really young people is the fact that there is a law that protects it right now. It's not out there. As soon as you make it not illegal to groom these children, the predators are out there. Make no mistake. It's not like making this legal would create predators. They're already there. They're waiting for something like this to happen so they can take advantage of it and not
so
go
much
to
more
jail.
accessible.
That's right. Now, let me tell you something.
Well, and I feel like, or go ahead.
I was going to say real quick, somebody like Chad who has 3 daughters, what's going to happen is you're going to start finding the prisons full of dads because the dads are not going to tolerate it, whether you pass a law or not. They're just simply not going to tolerate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like once this passes, that it's just going to kind of open up a new realm for the rest of the world to follow suit. And once it passes, it's going to be kind of like the whole LGBTQ LMNOP thing, where at first it was them fighting for their right to be married to each other. Okay, fine, we gave it. But then it just spirals into one thing after the next. And all I foresee this being is, yeah, right now it might be like a 10-year difference. But down the line, I feel it's going to get pushed to 20 years, 30 years, 40-year difference. And before too long, there's not going to be an age gap. It's going to be anyone under the age of 18 is allowed and able to consent to sex with whoever they want. And I feel like that's where we're headed.
Yeah. And just like the trans stuff that we're seeing right now kind of rear its ugly head, then what's going to happen is if they ever do pass a law like this, and again, we'll get more into how the UN, if it has any impact on U.S. law anyway, but if it ever does get legalized to do this and to groom little kids, then they're going to take it to that next level. Like acceptance wasn't enough. Now you have to really accept us. And now they're going to start rioting and burning crap down because they're like, you don't accept me. You don't accept me like I am, this is normal behavior. Like was it North American Man Boy Love Association? There's an actual association here in the United States of grown ass men who get together and talk, and they talk about little boys. I mean, it's an official organization in NAMBLA. The only reason why I know about it is because South Park did an episode, and I couldn't believe. I looked it up while I was watching the episode. I said, "This is a real organization." I could not.
Okay,
believe
I've never heard of it. Thank God.
Yeah. It was actually Cartman was mad because they wouldn't hit on him. They were hitting on all the other little boys, but they wouldn't hit on Cartman. And I remember reading, I was like, "Man, South Park usually hits on real topics, but they're really hitting on this." And when I Googled it, it was a real thing.
That's so crazy.
Yes, it is.
But we are kind of, like you said, we're kind of out ahead with the whole trans movement right now too. But I do notice that more people are starting to speak up and retaliate against it, which I feel like is a very, very strong move in the right direction. People aren't as scared to kind of bow down to everything anymore. So if we're starting to follow suit with the UN and pass things such as this, I just don't think it's going to fly. I'm noticing more and more people starting to actually speak up for what's going on, and people have had enough. And this is going to be one of those things where people, I believe, and I hope in the United States will stand together and say, no, that is completely wrong.
I think you'll find that in bigger numbers. I do think that, like what you had mentioned a minute ago about people speaking up, I think a lot of it has to do with people waiting for other people to speak up. And now that they saw them speak up, they're like, okay, so I'm not alone. And now they are speaking out in numbers. I don't see anything like this ever coming to be in the United States, at least not in my lifetime. And I truly believe that the UN has zero bearing on anything in the United States. And that doesn't mean that the really wacko far left does not look at that as saying, well, see, the CNN accepts that, or excuse me, the UN accepts that. So, I mean, they're the experts, so we should look at that too, because they do the same thing with gun laws. They're trying to do weird things worldwide with the United Nations, and the United States has been lucky enough not to allow that to happen. And the reason why is because the UN has zero legislative power whatsoever in the United States. The only way anything can actually come about with what the UN has any involvement in is if the United States happens to ratify that. That means Congress has to ratify that. I don't think anybody in the United States right now, I know it's certainly a Republican controlled Congress and a Democrat controlled Senate, but I still don't think even the wackos on the far left are brave enough to allow something like this to happen, knowing that there would be massive blowback in some of these areas. I mean, let's face it, some of these people who need reelection, they need a few conservatives to vote for them, conservative-minded people. They might be Democrats, but they're conservative-minded Democrats. And I know I'm certainly not going to paint with a broad brush and say every Democrat would support this, because I truly believe most Democrats would not go along with something like this.
No, and I heard something the other day, and I actually really agree with it. I never really thought of it that way. Well, yes and no, because I have my mom and my stepdad. They vote more on the blue side, and we butt heads about it, whatever. But I can see, I respect the old liberal people, the older generation. I do feel like they think a little bit more conservatively, yet they still have those, what am I trying to say? The old liberals, I'm good with the older liberals, the older generation liberals. And then we've got, which side of the conservatives? See, now I've lost my train of thought. But the older generation, they don't feel the same way as the new generation does when it comes to the liberal side of things, the left side of things. So for anything like this to ever pass, I don't think it'll be in either one of our lifetimes. I would hope not. I mean, we're catering to what is it, like 1% of the world right now?
Yeah.
With the whole LGBTQ, whatnot. But you've got all the Republicans, and then you've got the older generation of the liberals that would never vote for this, is basically what I'm trying to say. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Pregnancy brain, I swear.
I think in many cases when you're dealing with people like this also, because social media has made it such a big deal to be part of the cool kid crowd, that when the trendy stuff becomes trendy, some of these people might actually post a little ring around their picture on Facebook and say, "Look at me, I'm one of the cool kids because I agree with you on this week's new little thing to support or whatever." But they don't have to tell people who they vote for when they go in the voting booths, and I think that's what keeps some politicians, and I'll say honest in quotes because I don't think any of them are honest, but I think it keeps some politicians at least with their ear to the ground, realizing that, yeah, these people are bragging about how they support everything I'm talking about on social media, but are they really going to vote for me, or they're going to quietly vote for the person to unseat me because they truly in their heart don't agree with this? They're just afraid to say it on their social media page.
Right. It's like they've already branded themselves to one side, and to go against it would be, I feel like they think that they're going to put like a nail in a coffin. Basically, they have to go with whatever their party is saying.
Yeah, definitely.
And Republicans are the same way. I've seen it on both sides.
Yeah, it's not party exclusive.
Both sides have the hardcore, where if your side says it, you go with it. And that's why I like what we're able to talk about over here. Is I just want to know why people think the way they think. And I want to hear you out for what you have to say. And I might not agree with everything, but there's things that I don't agree with on the Republican side too, even though I vote red.
Well, I know and Chad and I were talking about this earlier before we came on, that I couldn't place it. Now it just hit me where I saw it. Washington State is trying to pass a law right now to where people of any age don't need parental consent to have a sex change, essentially transition from one gender to the other, meaning the puberty blockers and all that kinds of stuff. So, I mean, we've got states already trying to do weird, crazy stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me. It's like Chad and I were talking about earlier, when the UN endorses something like this, and let's just call it what it is, it's pedophilia. When the UN endorses something like that, yes, maybe we don't get that law federally. I don't see our federal Congress ever allowing something like that to happen. But you got these crazy states out there like your Californias, your Oregons, your Washingtons, your New Yorks, that they get enough people in power because they have such high numbers to vote them into office. It's very easy for them to say, to go into a committee meeting, at a state level. I'm not talking about federal level, just at a state level. Let's say Washington State, where they're talking about this, allowing transgender or people to transition of any age. Okay, if they go in there and decide that this is a really cool thing that the UN is talking about, they have a committee meeting to throw this up. And first of all, it's crazy that any committee member would do this, but they will. They'll say, look, as my quote expert case, the UN approves of this. The UN, because they're thinking that they put the UN so high up on a pedestal that that's going to be their source, their expert source, that they say, well, I mean, why wouldn't we do this? The rest of the world agrees with this, because they think the UN speaks for the entire world. So that's the thing that scares me more than anything, not the fact that we'd ever ratify something like this and allow it to happen in the States, but that some of these individual states begin to start implementing really crazy laws like this, because they use this as the UN being their case study as, well, look at these experts. They agree that this is a good thing. And then you get state by state by state and start doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's just a matter of time. And all it takes is them banding together to really discuss it before it becomes viral, essentially. And people start to think more into it and it becomes more accepted.
Well, like with the trans thing, and I think I speak for a lot of people here. I really, honestly, if you want to play pretend, I don't care. I honestly don't care. But don't act like I should care. You do your thing, leave me alone. I'm good. I don't need you to try to convince me that the game you're playing is a game I should play also. These people could honestly coexist if they just shut up and do their own little thing quietly. None of us would care. Honestly, wouldn't care. When you close your door and go into your own house, I don't care what you do. But when you come out and march on the street and because you're pissed off because I won't openly root for you, that's a problem, because you're not going to bully me into doing that. And most of America, I think, is at that point. It's like a flashpoint where they're like, no, I'm not falling for this. And I think that's why you're getting the pushback that you're getting right now.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I'm trying to go ahead. I'm Liz. I'm trying to read the article.
I watched a thing. I don't remember where it was, maybe TikTok, but it was an older generational trans woman. And, he, she, whatever. They were kind of right. I actually enjoyed listening to, I think she's still a he. So he's like, you can call me a he. I just like to pretend to be a woman type thing. Like, trans has always been around. They've been around for a really long time, but it was, men, they just dress as women, but we're called trans women. I don't ever want to take take on the gender role of being a woman, because I'm not a woman. And so it's crazy to actually listen to rational thinking people, because I'm with you. If somebody wants to do something, like, by all means, do your thing. But it's this new generation that is just shoving everything down our throats 24/7, and social media. And, we have to think this certain way, or else we're non-inclusive, or we're a bigot, or we're transphobic. And I don't even know why they say transphobic, because most of us aren't scared of them. We just don't agree with them. Yeah. But it is interesting to listen to. I know I keep bringing up the older generation, but the older generational trans women versus this newer generation, where it is just like they're out for blood, basically.
Yet, unfortunately, and I think this is probably the biggest thing as far as the whole acceptance thing, whether it's for the trans stuff or now the pedophilia stuff that these UN wackos are trying to push. At what point did everybody decide on this crazy twisted mindset on the left that our kids were okay to target? I mean, just leave our kids alone, man. I mean, you realize how much easier things would be if these people would quit targeting our kids? I mean, we would probably be okay with a whole lot of stuff if you just leave our kids out of it. I'll say this, even like a lot of politicians are pretty good about this, as much as I despise politicians. They don't talk about each other's kids unless they're grown-ass men who are crackheads like Hunter Biden. Most of them they leave their kids out of it. You know, even of age children, they usually will not include them in all the mudslinging and dirts that they do during campaigns and all that. Usually kids are just known to be off limits on stuff like that. Why can't they be off limits all the time? I don't understand that. I don't understand why we have to all of a sudden start getting putting up our own defense to protect our own children whenever they shouldn't be targeted in the first place.
I know. It's because they're an easy target. They're easy to groom from a young age, and they're basically grooming the next generation to think exactly how they want them to think.
Right. That's
it's
right.
so sad. It's disgusting.
Yep.
And it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it.
No.
I mean, can you imagine? We didn't have all this growing up at 6 to 12 years old. We weren't exposed. We weren't exposed to this. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have just openly stuff. I mean, you know, it is what it is. These kids see everything and hear everything now. You can't expect them to even reach 10 years old and not see some of the things we probably didn't see till we were a lot older.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a different world kids are growing up in, and they are exposed to this stuff way before, you know, and even on that side of it, you know, there's some kids that decide, oh, my kid's going to be this gender from before they're even born, or I'm going to raise them like this. And it's like, how do you know, can you groom a kid to be a certain way, or will that kid inherently overrule it? I don't know. I don't know what the science is behind that, but it's interesting.
Well, it's got to be certifiable child abuse if you raise a child different than what they actually are, because there is science behind what they are. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry people don't want to acknowledge that. So it should be, you know, some kind of certifiable child abuse. I mean, how is that any different than mistreating your child? You're mistreating them. You're essentially making them a target too.
But kids don't know enough at that age to speak up and say any different. They're going to do what the parent says, and that's what they know.
And the majority of children at a very young age are people pleasers. So
correct.
They're not looking to push back. They're not looking to refuse whatever advance that nutbag is making on them. That's unfortunately why they have the jokes and the memes and all that. But it's true. The vans that say they have candy written on the side in hand print, because the children are so easy to follow and to coax into doing stuff, you know. And again, they're people pleasers. They you know, that's where half of these people, you see videos online all the time where these people go up to these kids and say, hey, you know, your grandma told me to come pick you up from the bus stop, you know, you mind riding with me? Where the kid doesn't want to push back on that. First of all, they've been taught, hopefully in some cases, that adults are a figure of authority. Unfortunately, there should be a caveat to that unless there should be an unless in there, you know. But we teach our kids to listen to grown-ups. So sometimes, unfortunately, these kids are already abducted or whatever before they realize this is a wrong adult to be respecting that authority on.
Yeah. I think kids by nature it's just by nature, they're there to want to please the adult. They're there to obey an adult. And they're intimidated by adults. And that's why our kids are so easily targeted, because their brains are still forming. It's easy to kind of mold it how they want them to think and to brainwash them essentially into thinking exactly what you want them to think. And then them not knowing any better and thinking, okay, well, yeah, this is okay. And it just completely skews their brain process and their thoughts. And it's so sad. I think, honestly, my age group is about the last age group to have kind of a normal childhood before social media actually took over. Literally, though. And it's crazy because I'm seeing anyone younger than me, it's just a different story. And it's crazy to think back where, you know, social media has changed the dynamics of so much of the way that people think, and all of these laws that are trying to be passed, and all of these agendas that are trending and whatnot. This is a social media based thing. And I think back to, you know, my age group was really the last age group to get to experience a good, wholesome childhood without all of the crazy shit that's going on.
Right. Well, by the way, is a great topic too, Mackenzie. Thanks for bringing this up. I think we'll probably want to touch more on this. Let's do, and no pun intended on that. I didn't mean that to sound like that. Let's do a little bit more research on this, and in next week's show, maybe go in there and look a little bit deeper into what they're talking about here, because I would be curious after this article came out. I think it was yesterday. What kind of blowback they're getting from this point, because surely somebody is pushing back. And you know what might not be a bad idea too. We have some congressmen that I have a way to contact them. I may call them and find out what they think about this too, just to get their feedback on that. I would love to know. Now, obviously they're conservative people, but I would love to hear their thoughts on this, whether it's on the record or off the record. I don't have to say who they are. But I mean, I would love to see what they think about this. And if they have any intention of acknowledging this, if it ever gets brought up in, federal, I doubt it ever would be again, because I think people would stay away from that. But I certainly think it's something worth asking.
Yeah, definitely.
Guys, I got some things I got to get on. I know we're going to make this a quick show tonight. Chad and Mackenzie, if you guys are okay, you guys are okay if we wrap this up?
Yeah,
we're good.
Okay. Look, folks, if you've got anything that you would like for us to cover on the ThinkTown podcast, again, for those of you watching on Legally Armed America, ThinkTown podcast is outside of the normal Second Amendment stuff that I would do on Legally Armed America, covering anything politics, any topical events or whatever. So if you have something even outside of the Second Amendment community you'd like to talk about, please shoot me. You've got my normal email on Legally Armed America, paul@legallyarmedamerica.com, but you can also email me at paul@thinktown.live. Again, paul@thinktown.live. And, send us your ideas, something you'd like for us to talk about. Hopefully we'll have Kendall back next week, so the full 4-man panel will be back. We got a lot of things going on, a lot of life stuff going on. So obviously different weeks you're going to have one or two of us that are not going to be available, but hopefully we have all 4 of us back next week.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, Mackenzie and Chad, thanks again for hanging out tonight. And
Sure.
I guess we'll catch everybody again next week.
All right, guys.
All right. See ya.
See you guys.
See y'all.